Don't fall in love with me. Those were the first words the Korean billionaire said after placing the marriage contract in front of me. 7 words, cold, final, like a warning carved into stone. I should have walked away. But my mother's hospital bills were piling up, my visa was expiring, and I had no one left to help me in Seoul. So I picked up the pen and signed my heart away. What I didn't know was that the cold man sitting across from me would become the reason I cried every single night. And he definitely did not expect me to love him for real. My name is Zarah, 24 years old, Nigerian, graduate student in South Korea on a scholarship that barely covered my tuition. When I first arrived in Seoul, I thought I had made it. I thought the hard part was over. I had worked so hard back in Lagos, stayed up so many nights, cried so many quiet tears just to earn that scholarship. I remember when my acceptance letter arrived. My mother screamed so loud the neighbors knocked on our door. She held my face in both hands and said, "Zarah, you are going to change everything for us." I believed her. But Seoul had its own way of humbling you. The city was beautiful, yes. The lights, the food, the organized chaos of it all, but beauty does not pay rent. Beauty does not cover hospital bills. Beauty does not stop a visa from expiring. I worked 2 part-time jobs while completing my postgraduate research. Mornings at a small bakery. Evenings at a luxury hotel in Gangnam, where I worked as a banquet server. My apartment was barely bigger than a storage room. I shared it with 2 other girls. I usually took the floor with a folded blanket underneath me. I did not complain. Complaining felt like betraying every sacrifice my mother had made to get me here. But then the phone call came. It was a Tuesday evening. I was outside the bakery in my flour-dusted apron, eating a cold triangle of gimbap I had saved from lunch, when my phone buzzed. An unknown Nigerian number. I picked up, and the voice on the other end told me my mother had collapsed. Not a small collapse. The doctor used words I had to look up later. Cardiac complications, emergency surgery, immediate financial commitment required. I stood on that street corner for a long time after the call ended. People walked past me. Cars honked. The city moved in its usual relentless way, completely indifferent to the fact that my entire world had just cracked open beneath my feet. I called my aunt in Lagos. She could not help. Emergency, university funds would take 6 to 8 weeks. My mother did not have 6 to 8 weeks. And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I understood exactly how cornered I was, I received an automated email from the Korean immigration office. My student visa was expiring in 31 days. Without a visa, I could not stay. Without staying, I could not finish my research. Without my research, I lost everything. 31 days. That was the week my hands started shaking from tiredness in the middle of the day, and I would press them flat against my thighs and breathe slowly and keep moving. Because stopping was not an option. It was a rainy Thursday when everything changed. The hotel was hosting a private dinner on the 32nd floor. The kind of event where the tablecloths cost more than my monthly rent and the wine was older than I was. I had been on my feet for 6 hours. My lower back was a dull, persistent ache. My cheeks hurt from holding the required professional smile. I was carrying a tray of coffee service when it happened. A guest shifted his chair back without warning. The edge caught my hip. The tray tilted. I grabbed for it, caught most of it, but the cup on the far end went over and a full pour of hot black coffee landed directly on the white shirt of the man sitting at the corner table. Time stopped. I heard the sharp intake of breath from 2 nearby servers. I heard the quiet that fell over that section of the room like a curtain dropping. And then I looked up. Han Jae-won. I did not know his name in that moment, but I would later understand why every person in that room had gone very still. Han Jae-won was 32 years old, CEO of JW Holdings, one of the largest private investment groups in South Korea. Old money, generational power. The gossip columns called him the Ice Prince. He sat very still as the coffee spread across his shirt. He did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked down at the damage and then he looked up at me. His eyes were dark, sharp, and completely calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than anger. The hotel manager was already rushing over, apologizing in rapid Korean, ready to pull me off the floor for the rest of the night. But Han Jae-won raised one hand, barely a gesture, and the manager went quiet mid-sentence. He looked at me, not through me the way powerful people often look at service staff. At me, directly and deliberately. "Do you need money?" he said. The words were so unexpected, I was not immediately sure I had heard them correctly. "Excuse me," I said. He reached into his jacket and produced a flat black business card. He placed it on the edge of the table in front of me like he was setting a piece on a chessboard. "Call that number," he said, "tomorrow before noon." Then he picked up his phone, excused himself from the table, and walked out of the room without waiting for a response. I picked up the card. Thick matte paper, no logo, just a name and a number. And for the first time in weeks, the crushing pressure in my chest had something unfamiliar mixed into it. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. I called the next morning. A car came at 2 o'clock and took me to a private office in Gangnam, 14th floor, bookshelves on 2 walls, floor-to-ceiling windows over the gray city. Han Jae-won was already there. There was a document on the table between us, 8 pages, bound at the top with a clip, the words contract agreement at the top, below that 2 names. His name. And mine. "I need to be married," he said. His tone was businesslike, like he was describing a strategic acquisition, not a human arrangement. "My family has been applying pressure. There is a business matter that would benefit from the optics of a stable personal situation. I need a wife for 1 year." He paused. "You need money and a visa solution. A spousal resident status would resolve your immigration issue. I will also cover your mother's medical expenses and provide a monthly allowance for the duration of our arrangement." He slid the document forward. "The arrangement is strictly functional. There is one rule." He looked at me. "Don't fall in love with me." I felt something between a laugh and a sob rise in my chest, which I contained through sheer force of will. The audacity of that sentence. As if the most pressing danger in this clinical transaction was that I might develop feelings for a man who had just handed me a contract like a property deed. I should have walked out. My phone buzzed. A message from my aunt. "The hospital is asking for immediate payment. Your mother is asking for you." I looked at the document. I thought about my mother's face, her hands, the way she hummed while she cooked. I picked up the pen. The wedding was 3 days later. A civil ceremony at a government office. No flowers, no family, 40 minutes including the paperwork. We signed documents, answered questions in flat, correct voices, and that was our wedding. I moved into his penthouse that evening. Beautiful in the way rooms in architecture magazines are beautiful, designed with impeccable taste and a complete indifference to warmth. Clean lines, neutral tones, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. A housekeeper named Mrs. Yoon showed me to my room. My room, on the upper floor, separated from Jaewon's suite by the entire... I sat on the edge of the very large, very clean, very cold bed. I was married, to a stranger, in a country that was not mine, and my mother was in a hospital bed in Lagos, 5,000 miles away, not knowing any of this. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. Then I unpacked my single suitcase. The first 2 weeks were a masterclass in coexistence without connection. We ate separately, barely talked, only acted like a real couple in public. When we appeared together at dinners and events, something shifted in him. Not warmth exactly, but a calibration. He would speak to me with a quality of attention that was different from home. He would place a hand at the small of my back when we walked into a room, the pressure light and precise. His family believed us completely. After one business dinner, on the way home in the car, Jaewon looked at me in the dark and said, "You are good at this." I looked back at him. It was the most direct personal observation he had ever made. "Thank you," I said. He looked away again. We rode the rest of the way in silence. But something had shifted, like a window opened somewhere and the air had changed quality. Then the small things started. The jacket incident happened in the third week. I had stayed up past 2 in the morning working on my research thesis, fell asleep at the dining table, and woke up on the couch. I had not gone to the couch. Over me was a heavy gray jacket, not a blanket. Jaewon's jacket, folded lengthwise and draped carefully from my shoulders to my knees. The light was on under his study door. He had been awake. He had seen me. And instead of waking me or leaving me where I was, he had done something quietly and carefully that required actually seeing me as a person. I pressed my face into the cushion. My heart was doing something I needed it to stop doing. A month later, I was standing outside the hotel past 11, waiting for my bus in the cold drizzle, when a black car pulled up. Jaewon was in the back seat. He looked at me standing in the rain with my bag pulled close and said, "Get in." We drove several minutes without speaking. I said, "How did you know I was here?" He looked out the window. "I had Mrs. Yoon check your schedule. I was in this area for a meeting that finished late. It is not practical for you to take the bus at this hour." That was not the whole truth, and I knew it. His building was not in this direction. His office was not in this direction. But I looked at his profile in the passing streetlights, that precise, composed face with the set of a jaw that would never admit to what it was actually doing, and I did not press him. When we got home, and I was walking toward my room, his voice came from behind me. "Zarah." I turned. "You should eat something," he said. "Mrs. Yoon left food." Then he walked into his study. I stood in the hallway. The warmth that moved through me was entirely inconvenient. I started learning Han Jaewon the way you learn a piece of music you were not sure you would like. Slowly, with attention. He slept very little, worked with a focus that bordered on severity but was never frantic, drank his coffee plain at exactly the same time every morning, had a habit of pressing his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose when he was thinking, then dropping his hand 2 seconds later. And he read, not just financial reports. In the bookcase in his study, between the professional texts, there were novels. Korean literature mostly, some worn at the spine in ways that showed reading and returning and reading again. Once, when he was out, I stood in the doorway of his study and looked at those shelves. He had the same copy of a particular novel that I had on my shelf. Same old translated edition, cover worn at the corners. I did not mention it, but I thought about it. Jaewon was not cruel. I want to be precise about that. He was contained. There is a difference. What he was, I was beginning to understand, was lonely in a way so long-standing that he had built an entire architecture of success and structure around it. The coldness was not his nature. It was his defense, constructed so carefully and maintained so consistently that I suspected even he had stopped being able to see the difference. But I could see it. And I was falling in love with that person. Quietly, stubbornly, against every instruction and every warning I had given myself. This was, by any reasonable measure, a disaster. Month 5. I was up at 3 in the morning for water when I passed his study. The light was on, which was not unusual, but the sound was. His voice, low and barely audible through the not-quite-closed door, in a register I had never heard from him. The carefully maintained control was gone. What was there instead sounded like someone trying to hold something back and failing. I stood in the dark hallway and did not breathe. Then the voice stopped, a long silence. Then I heard very clearly, 3 words in Korean. "I know, father." I froze. Jaewon's father had been dead for 6 years. I moved back to my room quietly before he could come out. But I lay awake for a long time after. 3 weeks later, I found photographs in the supply drawer of his study. An older man, distinguished, with Jaewon's same quality of stillness. Father and son. The older man's hand on Jaewon's shoulder. The younger Jaewon looking up with an expression I had never seen on his face. Open, just open, fully and without defense. I put the photographs back exactly as I had found them. And I thought about a man who built walls around himself after losing the person who had taught him it was safe to let them down. My heart, which had been making its own quiet decisions for months, made one more. Then she arrived. Her name was Suah, Choi Suah, and she walked into the restaurant where Jaewon and I were having dinner with business partners the way certain women walk into rooms, as if the room had been waiting for her. Beautiful in a way that felt architectural, precise, her clothing impeccable, her manner the polish of someone who had always belonged in this world. Jaewon saw her before she saw him. I was watching him, the way I always watched him in company now, and I caught the moment. A stillness descended on him, deeper than his usual stillness, moving through his features quickly and contained just as quickly. She crossed the room. She greeted the business partners. She looked at Jaewon. Jaewon, she said. His name in her mouth had a particular quality. Familiar, weighted. He introduced me. His wife, he said. Zarah. She looked at me. Her eyes performed a quick, thorough assessment. She smiled warmly. I matched her, warmly, sincerely. I excused myself once to the bathroom, stood over the sink with cold water on my wrists, and had a brief, quiet conversation with my reflection about the nature of contracts and the particular stupidity of falling in love. Then I went back out and sat beside my husband and played the role with every skill I had. She was his ex-fiancée. Jiyeon told me 2 days later, 3 years together. Everyone thought it was settled. Then something happened, neither of them talked about it, and she went to America for 2 years. She has been back for 2 weeks, Jiyeon said. She has been in contact with Opa. I sat with my phone after the call ended and looked at the wall of my room for a long time. 3 days later, Suah came to the apartment to sign investment documents. Jaewon told me it would be 40 minutes. I stayed in my room with my research. But sound carries in a penthouse when everything is quiet. I heard her voice raise slightly from the living room when the documents were signed, and the conversation should have been ending. Do you actually care about that girl? She said. The silence that followed was 11 seconds. I counted them. Then Jaewon said, she is only temporary. Temporary. I sat on my bed and did not move. Something inside me had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that happens right after something breaks. He had not lied to her. He had not lied to me. The contract was there in black ink. 1 year, functional, no feelings involved. The only person who had not been told the truth was myself. I got up, went to the bathroom, turned on the shower so the water would cover everything. And then I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried in a way I had not cried since the night my aunt called from Lagos. Silently, hands pressed against my mouth, the whole body kind of crying that leaves you hollow. Then I dried my face. And I went out and said the food was good and asked about his meeting schedule and behaved exactly as I had been for 5 months. But that night, I made a decision. Quiet, final, already complete. I was going to leave. I packed over 2 evenings. The things he had provided as part of the arrangement I left neatly on the chair in my room. The book he had left on the coffee table, I took. I signed the divorce documents, left them on the dining table, left 1 sentence on a notepad on top. Thank you for everything. I hope you find your way back to being open with someone again. Then at 4:47 in the morning, I took my bag and my 1 borrowed book and I left. Jaewon came downstairs at 6:15. He found the document on the dining table. He read the 1 sentence on the notepad. He stood there for 3 minutes without moving. Then he searched. Her university, her workplace, her former apartment, her friends. Nothing. He stood on the street outside her old building in the early morning light, and for the first time in a very long time, Han Jaewon did not know what to do. The apartment was wrong without her in it. He stood in the kitchen that evening and looked at the stove, Thought about rice cooked during a storm. A voice describing blue kitchen tiles in Lagos. A woman who sat on the kitchen counter as a child just to be near the warmth of her mother. He thought about a sentence spoken at a family dinner that had been more precisely true than anything he had said in years. He thought about a book that disappeared from the coffee table and was never mentioned. He sat at the kitchen counter and did not eat. The apartment was very quiet. The kind of quiet that is not rest. 2 months passed. He worked. He poured himself into the structure of his days with the kind of focus that does not heal anything, but successfully occupies every available hour. Suah called. He did not return the call. His mother called. Jaiwon, she said, what happened? Nothing, he said. Jaiwon, his mother said, in the tone of a woman who had known him for 32 years. He did not have an answer. He found her address. She was in Lagos, gone back to her mother, reapplied to complete her research degree remotely. She had not contested the divorce filing. She had simply left a door open and walked away from it. He sat with this for 3 weeks. Then he looked at the divorce papers on his desk, still unsigned on his side. He had picked them up 4 times and put them down each time without explanation to himself. He took out the marriage contract. He read it once, from beginning to end. He found a pen. He crossed out 1 line. No feelings involved. Lagos in the dry season. Heat that was completely different from Seoul's cold precision. Alive and encompassing and loud with sound. Street vendors, traffic, birds, a neighbor's music. The world conducting itself without apology. Zarah had been home for 2.5 months. She had settled into a rhythm. Mornings caring for her mother, who was recovering well, strong enough now to complain about Zarah's cooking. Afternoons on her research. Evenings on the small porch watching the street. She did not think about Seoul every day. This was progress. She thought about a kitchen and a storm and rice on a counter. A jacket laid over her while she slept. A book on a coffee table left without a note. The specific silence of a man who expressed himself only in actions because he had lost the habit of words. She had reread that book 4 times. She had loved him. She had left. Both of those things were true. Both of those things were complete. She was getting there. On a Wednesday afternoon, her mother called from the back of the house. Zarah, someone is at the door. She marked her page, went down the hallway, opened the door. The afternoon light was behind him, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. The shoes, familiar, expensive, slightly dusty from the unpaved section of her street. Dark trousers, a plain shirt, sleeves rolled. His face. Tired, genuinely tired in a way composure could not fully cover. He had been traveling. He had probably been planning this longer than the travel. No bodyguards, no armor, no expensive suit. Just him. He was holding something. She recognized the document before she could read it, the weight of the paper. The marriage contract. She looked at it, she looked at him. She said nothing. He said, I was the one who made the rules. His voice was even, but it was the effort of maintained evenness, not the absence of feeling underneath. He stepped forward once, and she held her ground in the doorway. He looked at her, in the way she had spent months learning to read. And I was the one who broke them first, he said. I just didn't have the language for it until you were gone. He held the document out. She looked at the line she could now see, the single crossed-out clause. No feelings involved. 2 lines of ink through the center. Simple, irrevocable. He said quietly, you broke my heart. Not as accusation, not as performance. As the most honest sentence Han Jae-won had ever said out loud. She looked at this man who had come to Lagos without bodyguards or preparation, standing on a dusty street outside her mother's house with his walls taken down and his heart in his hands. She thought of the jacket, the rain, the kitchen during the storm, the book. She thought of temporary, and the bathtub, and the 4 a.m. departure with a bag over her shoulder. And then she thought, he is here. Of all the things he could have done, of all the controlled, efficient, structurally sound options available to a man of his resources. He got on a plane. He came to her door. He brought the contract with one line crossed out. She stepped back from the doorway. She said, "You should come in." He exhaled. One breath, just one, but she heard everything in it. He stepped over the threshold. Behind her in the house, she heard her mother's voice, curious and awake, asking who had come. She looked at the man standing in the hallway of her mother's house. Dusty shoes and tired eyes and a contract with a crossed-out line. And she felt the particular warmth that had been quiet for 2.5 months rekindle. Just a moment, she called back to her mother. Then to Jaiwan, quietly she said, "She's going to have questions." Something moved across his face, the thing his walls were built to contain. He said, "I know." He did not look afraid. For the first time in everything she had witnessed of him, Han Jaiwan did not look afraid. She turned and led him down the hallway toward her mother's voice. And outside, the street continued its noise, and the afternoon light came through the window in long rectangles, and somewhere in the city a radio was playing. And the contract sat in his hand, its single crossed-out line facing up. No feelings involved. Gone now. Replaced by nothing written. Because what came next did not need a contract.